Tdap, it's all the same thing, generally speaking. So it targets against diphtheria, that's D, this is the vaccine against diphtheria, T is for tetanus, and P is for pertussis, all right? So let me erase that so you can see that better. This is a little fact I want you to know, all right? There's a very effective vaccine for diphtheria. It's called DTaP, all right? D stands for diphtheria. So this is the disease that we're preventing. T is for tetanus, and then P is for pertussis or whooping cough. Right? Okay. So we're still moving. So that's two organisms. Let's move on to the next one. The next one causes a very nasty disease. And if imagine you're a nurse, I want you to project 4 years from now, you're working in the ER, and a patient comes in with the condition I'm going to show you in a second. This is something you don't want to miss. Reason why the person can die in a matter of hours or days. All right. So again, the disease I'm going to mention the name to you now, but I'll talk about it later on. In fact, in a couple minutes, meningococcal meningitis. All right. Excuse me. So let me just identify some terms for you I'd like you to know. Meningitis, we hear about this a whole lot. All right. Meningitis can be caused by viruses. They can be caused by bacteria. All right. Or even fungi. Well, what is meningitis? If you remember your basic anatomy, here's the central nervous system. You have 3 layers of tissues that surround us. You guys probably remember the dura mater, the arachnoid, and the pia mater. Those are the meninges. So meningitis, itis is inflammation of the meninges. These layers become inflamed because of infection. Brain tissue can also become inflamed. All right? So the organism we're going to talk about in a second can cause this problem. So here's what happens. You breathe in respiratory droplets. The bacteria within those respiratory droplets, they stick to the pharyngeal area, to the throat, penetrates, all right, then it gets to blood vessels. And from the blood vessels, it goes to the blood, of course. So now you have a blood infection. But this organism loves to go to the spinal fluid, so it goes into the spinal column, all right? So the name of this organism is Neisseria meningitidis. Causes 2 diseases. Meningococcemia. All right, so meningitis, coccemia, this is infection of the blood. But the dangerous form is right over here. It's meningococcal meningitis. This is when the bacteria gets into the spinal cord. All right, in the spinal fluid, that fluid bathes the central nervous system, and then you have a major problem here. All right, it's a very dangerous one. Let me just say, we see a few cases in the United States. And we have a pretty good vaccine that targets some important strains, A, B, C, Y, and W. So those are just strains of the same organism. But most cases actually occur in this part of the planet, in sub-Saharan Africa, all right? But nonetheless, we do see cases here in the United States. And again, some of them are pretty tragic because people die within about, within 24 to 48 hours, all right? Let's get to signs and symptoms. Imagine this. So I'm going to forget about the slide for a bit. Think with me for a second here, all right? So you're that nurse in the ER. A mother brings a baby in. So here's a parent, mother and father. They bring their kid in, and this kid is almost comatose. And what you see back here, lots of rashes on the skin. We're going to define these rashes in a second. And of course, as a nurse, you're taking the patient history. So the parents tell you, well, 2 days ago, this person was playing soccer on the field. And then last night she had a fever. Then this morning she woke up. That's why we're here in the hospital now in the ER. And then she had all these rashes on the skin and she's almost comatose. Already you should be thinking about one disease only. That's meningococcal meningitis. All right? So again, these individuals who are infected, they pick up the pathogens through respiratory droplets. And then the bacteria is incubated and then disease kicked in. So all of these terms here, they refer to rashes. But the rashes, what happens, for example, you measure the size, the diameter of these rashes, you can classify them as petechia. So this is where the rash is about 1 to 2 millimeters in diameter. Purpurea is when it's 3 to 10, this is about 1 centimeter in diameter. And then, of course, ecchymosis, where it's greater than 1 centimeter. So again, it's not significant that you can classify this clinically, but realize this is a rash disease, all right? So I told you this bacteria loves to go to the spinal cord. So here's what you'd be doing as a nurse. You collect a spinal fluid on that patient. You do a spinal tap, and you send it to the microbiology laboratory. What's the most important state in microbiology is Gram state. So in the laboratory, they spin that down in a centrifuge, and they take the sediments, put it on the slide, and guess what they do? They do a Gram state. And of course, what you see here, in this case, white blood cells, see those little red dots? That's the bacteria in there. In fact, this is shown more nicely here, all right? Neisseria meningitidis is a gram-negative cocci. Loves to be in the spinal fluid, loves to cause problems in patients, all right? So, patients with meningococcal meningitis, a few of them end up with a very serious complication. So first of all, if you take a look at this, the death rate can be pretty high, all right, 10 to 15% or so. But there's some complications that can occur. Imagine the central nervous system is affected. So you can have diseases related to nervous function. Another disease I'd like you to remember is this one here. It's called Waterhouse-Friderichsen syndrome. Now, this is a very rare occasion when people actually get this disease. What happens, so take a look at the slide here. These are the kidneys, all right? And above the kidneys, of course, this is the adrenal glands. If you know, this is from autopsy, by the way. You can tell the adrenal glands, they're totally gone. It's totally disseminated, it's solubilized, actually. This is called Waterhouse-Friderichsen syndrome, all right? This is where you have destruction of the adrenal glands. And again, there's a link to this problem and in a few individuals who've had meningococcal meningitis. Other things can cause this, but there's a closer link to meningococcal meningitis. Again, I mentioned to you there's a vaccine for it, but it only protects you against 4 strains here, ACY and W135. There are some other strains, they're not very common in the United States. So again, if you have those other strains and you're not vaccinated for those strains, you can end up with this disease. Right? So moving on, there are other organisms that can cause disease in the upper respiratory tract. And again, meningitis in particular, this one here, Haemophilus influenza type B, also called HIV, not HIV, that's the AIDS virus. This is HIV, Haemophilus influenza type B. And here's all I want you to know. This is more common in young kids, newborns, but kids under 2 years old. So I want you to remember that fact. I see this organism causing meningitis in kids less than 2 years old. Worst case scenario, less than 6 months, because it takes about 6 months before the immune system starts building up. So again, one of the major causes of meningitis in infants is Haemophilus influenza type B, all right? Now, other things can cause Haemophilus, for example, Streptococcus pneumoniae, E. coli, Group E strep, Listeria. They are all involved with meningitis. But again, the 4 most important organisms we talked about so far, Streptococcus pyogenes, Corynebacterium diphtheria and diphtheria, Neisseria meningitidis with meningococcal meningitis, and then this last one here, Haemophilus influenza type 3, causes meningitis in kids. And here's a nice little table for you to actually work through on your own. It's meningitis caused by the gram-negative cocci, meningococcal meningitis, and this one caused by by Haemophilus influenza, all right? So those are the major diseases of the upper respiratory tract. 4 different organisms, many different diseases caused by Streptococcus pyogenes, but those are the major upper respiratory bacterial diseases. Now I want to move on. So here's the larynx. This is the voice box. What about diseases downstream? In other words, infection of the lung. That's a more serious complication here, a more serious problem. So we're going to look next at diseases of the lower respiratory tract, all right? So this is from the voice box all the way down to deep lung. All right, so terms for you. We're going to talk about these organisms. Don't worry about the names yet. We're going to talk about them as we go along. But I want you to know these terms, bronchitis and pneumonia. All right, so you hear this term a lot, bronchitis. You guys remember the bronchi, these are the respiratory passageways. So air actually moves through the trachea, gets into the bronchi, and then these get smaller and smaller. Ultimately, they lead into alveoli, where gas exchange occurs. So bronchitis, itis again means inflammation. This is inflammation of the bronchial passages. All right, these are the air tubes. Pneumonia, on the other hand, so you get into deep lung, it's an inflammatory condition in which fluid builds up in the alveoli. So basically, it's inflammation of the lung, those microscopic structures that we call the alveoli. This is where gas exchange occurs. So when people have inflammation, when people have pneumonia, that's highly inflamed. Now think about this. It's always good to be empathetic to what these people are going through. So one way to think about this, and we've all done this, you've been to the ocean, you've been in a swimming pool, you try to hold your breath as long as possible. And then of course you have to breathe, so you get up and you breathe. Get above water and you breathe. People with pneumonia, think about this, they have all that fluid inside the lung, the deep lung. They have a hard time. It's like they're drowning, literally. They have a hard time exchanging gases, carbon dioxide and oxygen, all right? Okay, so here are the organisms. Again, those tables are really, really important. I want to stress them again. These tables tell you a whole lot. About half of your, let me say, about half of your exam, if you know the tables pretty well, you should get about half of your exams, all right? So again, that's really important. Now let's get to the agent. Number one on the list is pertussis. This is also called whooping cough. It's also called the 100-day cough. All right, it's a very nasty disease, especially for kids. Let me just say this. What causes this disease? The organism is Bordetella pertussis. It's a gram-negative rod. This is what you're looking at here, all right? So Bordetella pertussis causes whooping cough. What do I want you to know from this slide? It produces a toxin, and here's the important thing. All right, so I'm going to put this big mark on this one. That toxin paralyzes the cilia. Remember we talked about those epithelial cells? They're ciliated. The toxins that's produced by this organism, all I want you to know from this slide, it paralyzes the cilia. So basically the cilia can't move. And you have mucus, all that stuff starts building up. Of course, that's going to produce the cold, the cough, the typical cough that you hear, that whooping cough. I'll show you a video in a second. But again, what do I want you to know? Whooping cough is called pertussis. That's another name for it. It's caused by Bordetella pertussis. Why do we have this disease? That bacterium produces a toxin that paralyzes the cilia on epithelial cells. So you can't move all this stuff up to the oral cavity. Things build up. Cells die, and secondary infections take place. So other organisms can cause disease too. All right? I want to talk about this disease as far as stages go. Right? This disease can be classified into 3 different stages. First is catarrhal stage. So somebody actually acquires the organism through respiratory droplets. What happens then? Well, within about a week or 2, what happens, that person has a buildup of mucus, of catarrhal, right here. It's a buildup of fluid in the pharynx, all right? So that builds up. The next stage is the paroxysm stage. What a paroxysm is, a fit or an attack, a sudden increase or recurrence of a symptom. So imagine this is one breath from here to here. I'm going to have multiple periods, multiple events, a fit trying to breathe, all right? So again, this is called a paroxysm. And then a staccato cough. What means is that you have a series of coughs in this one time, in this one breath period. And I'll show you a video in a second. So again, with pertussis or whooping cough, generally people go through 3 different stages. The catarrhal stage, you're building up mucus in the pharynx. The paroxysmal stage, where you have this repeated attack or fit attacks, these increasing recurrence of a certain symptom. And then you have that staccato cough. It's a cough that comes in a series of outbursts for at least one breath. So here's one breath, and you have multiple coughs within this breath. All right? Now I want to show you a video of a little baby with cancel that one. All right, so here's a video. I'm going to get to my slide. So hopefully the video pops up, but I want you to pay attention to this baby. It's something you can't miss. If you're a nurse in the ER, you don't want to miss this. This can be quite deadly. Hopefully the video pops up. Find out pretty soon. Tell me if you guys are seeing this. Can somebody tell me if you're seeing the screen?
No, there's nothing popping up.
I'm not seeing the screen.
Really?
Just the PowerPoint. Oh, there
We
it
can
is.
see. Oh, we see it
Oh,
now.
there you go, there you go. There you go.
Oh, you guys got it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, nice. So I'm going to start this over again. So this is pay attention to me. Pertussis in babies is quite deadly, all right?